Champion Vakras had built a legend out of a single, impossible fact. Nobody had ever touched him. Not once. In 347 sanctioned matches across 17 Federation years, his armored hide had remained as pristine as polished obsidian. His record wasn't simply perfect, it was clean. He fought in the highest tier of the Galactic Combat Federation, where species came with tusks, claws, spines, extra limbs, redundant hearts, reinforced cartilage, and reflexes engineered by ecosystems that treated weakness like a punchline. Vakras met them all inside the bright, regulated geometry of the ring and sent them away bruised, winded, and awed. He was faster than the Kelvin predators, whose entire hunting doctrine was built around bursts of motion too quick for most eyes to track. He was stronger than Thorian bulls, who could drag cargo sleds with their teeth across open stone. He was more skilled, more elegant than any contender who'd risen through the Federation ranks. Vakras didn't just win. He performed. The Federation loved performers. It loved champions who could be measured, admired, sold. It loved the ritual, the pageantry, the clean, bloodless mathematics of sanctioned violence, where a fight could be brutal without being ugly, decisive without being fatal, where warriors learned to pull strikes, avoid the forbidden zones, dance around the lines the way planets danced around stars, close enough to feel gravity, never close enough to burn. That's what sport combat was. Gravity without fire. The arena above Vulcan Prime was packed with 50,000 spectators, and more hovering in the broadcast sphere trillions across settled systems, watching through translated feeds. Holobanners rippled like liquid light. Sponsor glyphs crawled along the walls. The air itself shimmered with the faint distortion of safety fields. Vakras stood in the red corner, towering it to point for meters. A wall of muscle plated in armored hide that looked like living basalt. His primary arms too thick, corded limbs hung loose and relaxed, while his secondary arms rotated slowly, wrists flexing with the casual confidence of a creature who had never been forced to doubt his own body. Across the ring, in the blue corner, stood Lieutenant Jade Ericson, human, 1.7 meters, standard combat gear, no ceremonial plating, no tribal paint, no intimidating modifications, just a close-fitted suit in Federation-approved fabric, light gloves, boots, and a blank expression that made the cameras struggle to find drama on her face. The oddsmakers had been laughing for days. They'd given her a survival time of 47 seconds. Vakras regarded her with the indulgent patience of a champion presented with a novelty act. His voice resonated low, a seismic rumble translated by nodes that floated near the ring like attentive insects. Human, the translator rendered smoothly, you should forfeit. I am undefeated. I have never been touched in combat. Spare yourself humiliation. Jade tilted her head slightly, looking up at him, not at his chest, or his shoulders, or the huge arms that could crush alloy. She looked at his eyes, calm, unimpressed, almost bored. You've never been touched in sport combat, she said. Her voice didn't need amplification. The arena mix caught it and sent it everywhere. There's a difference. Vakras's secondary arms made a dismissive gesture. Combat is combat. No, Jade's reply was quiet, and because it was quiet. The nearest spectators leaned forward. Combat is survival. Sport is entertainment. You've been performing. I've been fighting. A ripple of reaction moved through the arena. Laughter here. Irritated murmurs there. The commentators in the broadcast sphere began talking over each other in 5 languages. Human bravado, they said. Human delusion. Human ignorance of Federation technique. Vakras smiled, an expression that showed teeth meant for tearing vegetation and, in older eras, softer prey. We are about to learn which matters more. The referee, a neutral Velkan official with pale scales and 3 blinking eyes, stepped into the center. A drone floated over his shoulder, projecting the Federation seal. This match follows standard Federation rules, he announced, voice crisp and practiced. No lethal intent. No strikes to primary neural clusters. No attacks to ocular organs, respiratory intake valves, or reproductive centers. Contact begins on my signal. Fighters ready. Vakras raised his primary arms and adopted the classical Thorian stance that had carried him through hundreds of victories. Wide base, center lowered, guard perfect, elbows aligned, shoulders angled. Textbook positioning, clean geometry. Every line suggested control. Jade simply stood facing him. No stance. Her arms hung loosely at her sides. Her knees weren't bent in any obvious fighting posture. Her weight seemed evenly distributed, not coiled, not ready. Vakras felt the crowd's attention shift, eager for spectacle. He heard a commentator's amused tone through the translator nodes. Unusual strategy. The translation fed into the arena. Or perhaps you have frozen with fear. Vakras let the remark hang, enjoying it. Jade didn't even glance toward the commentators. She kept her eyes on Vakras. I'm waiting, she said, for you to stop talking and start fighting. The referee activated the combat field. A faint hum rose from the ring as the safety matrix came online, ready to dampen lethal force and monitor forbidden strikes. The field shimmered briefly, then settled into invisibility. Begin. Vakras moved. To most species, he would have seemed to teleport. His lead arm snapped forward toward the human's center mass. A straight strike meant to test range and establish dominance. Even with the safety field, the force would be enough to fold most contenders. A clean hit, a crowd-pleasing opening. He never completed the motion. Strike 1. Jade's open palm caught his lead wrist mid-swing. Not a block blocks wasted time and force. It was a capture, a redirection. Her hand didn't meet his arm like a wall. It met it like a hinge, turning his momentum into a curve that pulled his shoulder slightly offline. Vakras's mind registered surprise in the space where surprise rarely lived. Strike 2. Jade's elbow drove into his exposed ribs, one of the few gaps in the Thorian stance. A place sport fighters avoided because it was inelegant to target it. The impact wasn't heavy, but it was sharp, precise, like a tool placed exactly where it belonged. Strike 3. Her knee rose into his midsection, not with theatrical wind-up, but with brutal efficiency. Vakras's diaphragm spasmed. The breath he hadn't realized he was holding escaped him in a single startled grunt. Strike 4. The back of her fist struck his temple as he bent forward again, not with showy power, but with perfect timing. A short, snapping motion that turned his balance into a question he couldn't answer. Strike 5. A hammer fist landed between his shoulder plates, along the ridge of nerve clusters that fed his upper limbs. His arms went momentarily numb. Vakras dropped to his knees. Total elapsed time, 1.3 seconds. The arena fell silent in a way no crowd ever did. 50,000 beings, some with lungs, some with gills, some with vents, some with chemical exchanges held whatever constituted breath. Vakras knelt on the mat, his nervous system trying to interpret a sequence it could not believe had occurred. He had felt impacts, multiple impacts. He could identify pain in 5 different places, but his mind, trained for sport patterns and telegraphed exchanges, could not reconstruct the chain fast enough to make sense of it. He looked up at Jade as if she were a physics problem that refused to solve. "What happened?" he asked. Jade stood exactly where she had started, posture unchanged. "I hit you 5 times, she said. "You were too busy executing perfect form to notice." The referee stared at his combat scanner. His third eye blinked rapidly as he verified the readout twice, then 3 times. "Champion Vakras has sustained 5 confirmed strikes," the referee said, voice strained by disbelief. "Structural damage minimal. Neural disruption significant. Does the champion wish to continue?" Vakras's pride rose like a tide, pushing aside the cold ache of confusion. To stop now after the first time he had ever been struck would stain him worse than any bruise. His species revered status. The Federation worshipped records, and Vakras himself had wrapped his identity so tightly around perfection. That surrender felt like death. He forced himself to stand. The arena's cameras zoomed in, hungry for his expression. "I was not prepared," he said, voice hardening. "I will not underestimate you again." Jade's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "That's your mistake." Vakras frowned. "Explain." "You think I want you prepared," she said. "I want you vulnerable." Big difference. Something in the way she said it flat, almost clinical, made Vakras's secondary heart flutter. It wasn't taunting. It was observation. Vakras attacked again. This time he stripped away the showmanship. No flourish. No crowd-pleasing arc. He drove forward with full commitment, speed and power aligned, intent sharpened into a spear. He aimed to overwhelm her before she could slip into whatever strange timing she possessed. The result was identical. 7 strikes this time, all landing before his offensive motion completed. Jade didn't move like a Federation fighter. She didn't trade blows. She didn't retreat and reset. She stepped into angles Vakras had never needed to acknowledge. Because sanctioned matches punished excessive aggression with points lost and warnings issued, she struck points on his anatomy that sport combat never targeted because they were too effective, too dangerous, too real. A sharp jab to the muscle that controlled his dominant arm. A downward chop to disrupt his knee joint. A short palm strike against the nerve line above his secondary heart. A foot sweep timed with his own forward drive. Vakras hit the mat again, harder this time. Pain spread, not the clean pain of a scored strike, but the disorienting pain of systems shutting down in protest. "You do not fight," Vakras gasped, trying to force air through a chest that refused cooperation. You attack. Jade looked down at him, and for the first time her voice carried emotion. Not anger, not excitement, something cold. The kind of emotion that came from memory rather than pride. You're right, she said. I don't fight. I neutralize threats as efficiently as possible. Vakras's translator nodes carried her words across the arena, and the silence changed. It wasn't just shock now. It was attention. The crowd had come for entertainment, and suddenly found itself watching something uncomfortably honest. Honor, Jade continued, is what warriors with time to spare discuss. I'm a soldier. I've faced enemies that actually wanted to kill me, not perform for audiences. She gestured around the arena with one gloved hand. The sponsors' glyphs drifted along the walls. The holographic banners flickered faintly as if embarrassed. You've spent 17 years perfecting your sport, she said. I've spent 12 years surviving combat where losing meant death. Vakras's vision blurred for a moment. His system tried to stabilize. His pride tried to speak. But the words came out smaller. How? He managed. Are you this fast? Jade shook her head. I'm not faster than you. The commentators who had been scrambling for sound bites froze, and the translators carried her next words with crisp clarity. My reaction time is slower than yours by about 30 milliseconds, she said. But I don't react. I act. Vakras stared at her, confused all over again. Explain. You wait, she said. You look for your opponent's movement, then respond with perfect form. That's what sport rewards: clean counters, textbook exchanges. Me? I decide what I'm going to do before the match starts, and I execute immediately. She tapped her chest once, like she was pointing to a clock inside herself. You defend and counter, she said. I just attack. By the time your brain processes that the fight has begun, I've already hit you 3 times. Vakras tried to rise. His legs trembled. His arms didn't obey the way they always had. He hated the sensation, his body betraying the authority he built over it. The referee approached cautiously, scanners still reading alarming patterns. Champion Vakras is unable to continue, the referee announced. Victor, Lieutenant Jade Ericson, by technical knockout. The arena erupted not in celebration, but in a roar of disbelieving noise. Shock spilled into argument. Arguments spilled into anger. Some cheered, thrilled by the upset. Others shouted protests, convinced something illegal must have happened. Vakras heard none of it clearly. His ears rang. His nervous system buzzed. The world felt tilted, like a ship that had lost its horizon. Jade extended her hand. Vakras stared at it. Human hand, small, unarmored, offered without hesitation. Slowly, he took it. Her grip was firm but not crushing. She helped him up without tugging for drama, as if lifting a fallen opponent was simply the next step in a process. You're an incredible athlete, she said quietly, just loud enough for him to hear over the roar. The best I've ever seen in sport combat. Vakras swallowed. But you asked me to fight, Jade added. That's different. Vakras's throat tightened. He hated how much those words landed. He hated how true they felt. What is the difference? He asked, and the question was not rhetorical. It was the sound of a worldview cracking. Jade released his hand and looked out at the crowd, at the glittering walls of the arena, at the floating drones capturing every angle. Athletes train to win, she said. Soldiers train to survive. She turned back to him. Humans have been at war with something, somewhere, for our entire history. We don't practice combat for entertainment. We practice because our species has needed to kill things that wanted to kill us. For millions of years, Vakras flinched at the casual way she used the word kill. Federation combat avoided that word like a contagion. That leaves a mark, Jade continued. You were never hit because no one you faced was actually trying to hurt you. They were trying to score points, claim victory, earn glory. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not with malice, but with focus. I was trying to end the fight before you knew it started, she said. Because that's how actual combat works. The person who strikes first and keeps striking usually wins. Vakras stared at her, seeing not a novelty act, not an underdog, not a spectacle for the Federation's appetite, but a soldier shaped by a different universe. Something inside him shifted from humiliation to curiosity. We should train together, he said abruptly. I want to learn what you know. Jade's expression softened, but only slightly. She didn't look flattered. She looked tired, as if she'd heard the request 100 times from men who wanted war as a hobby. No, she said gently. You should teach sport combat. You're brilliant at it. Vakras blinked. And you? I should teach survival combat, she said. That's what I'm good at. She let the words sit between them like a blade laid carefully on a table. They're different skills, she said. Both valuable, but don't confuse them. The crowd's noise continued to thunder, but Vakras felt oddly distant from it now, as if he were watching his own legend from far away. Jade stepped toward the exit tunnel, then paused and glanced back over her shoulder. You can tell people someone finally hit you 5 times in 1 second, she said. That's nothing to be ashamed of. That's just reality meeting sport. Then she walked out beneath the glaring lights, disappearing into the corridor where soldiers went when the show ended. Vakras stood alone in the ring, surrounded by drones and cheering and outrage and 1,000 commentators trying to manufacture meaning from what they had seen. Frame-by-frame analysis would begin within minutes. Experts would argue about angles and timing, about how a human with slower reaction time had dismantled a champion who had never been touched. Federation councils would debate whether the rules needed changing. Sponsors would scramble to rewrite contracts. Young fighters across the galaxy would replay the sequence until their muscles ached with imitation. But Vakras wasn't thinking about any of that. He touched the spot on his ribs where her elbow had landed and felt the faint, honest pain beneath his hide. A simple sensation, a grounding truth. He had been undefeated for 17 years, and in less than 2 seconds, he had learned more than 300 victories had ever taught him. Not about technique, about purpose, about the difference between looking strong and staying alive. And for the first time in his decorated career, Vakras understood that being untouched had never been the same as being unchallenged. He watched the tunnel where Jade had vanished, and he wondered quietly, with a humility that tasted unfamiliar, how many other truths the Federation had wrapped in glittering rules to keep them safe for entertainment. In the end, the most terrifying thing about the match wasn't that Vakras had been struck. It was that the strikes had been so easy. Reality had not needed to try very hard.